The night began without a warning, without a rumor that could be traced to a real source. It was one of those shows that felt ordinary in the most dangerous way, where nothing appeared broken on the surface. Yet everything underneath felt unstable. The arena filled the way it always did, with noise that bounced off steel and concrete. But something about the sound felt thinner, stretched, like it could tear. The energy never settled. It hovered. People sensed it without understanding it, the way bodies react before the mind catches up. Even before the cameras found their rhythm, there was an unspoken awareness that something had shifted backstage. It wasn't excitement, it was discomfort. The show moved forward, match after match, yet the usual connective tissue felt absent. Transitions lingered too long. Reactions landed half a beat late. Commentary sounded careful, as if every sentence had to pass an internal test before being released. Nothing was said directly, but the absence of confidence was obvious. The crowd responded in fragments, pockets of noise colliding with stretches of silence. It was the kind of silence that doesn't come from boredom, but from attention being pulled inward. People leaned forward without realizing they were doing it. Backstage, tension traveled faster than information. Wrestlers watched monitors instead of each other. Conversations cut off when footsteps approached. Nobody knew what they were waiting for, only that waiting felt unavoidable. Authority figures wore neutral expressions that didn't reach their eyes. Phones vibrated and were checked, then checked again. There was no confirmation, no denial, just a growing sense that control had slipped slightly out of reach. By the time the show reached its later stretch, the unease had thickened. The crowd didn't know why it felt wrong, but they knew it did. The arena lights seemed harsher, shadows deeper. The ring sat in the center like a question nobody wanted to ask. When the final segment before the break ended, there was a pause that lasted too long to be accidental. Commentary filled it with words that felt rehearsed, yet uncertain. The audience waited, not cheering, not booing, just suspended. In that suspended moment, the show stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like exposure. Something was about to be revealed, and whatever it wasn't coming back the way it left. The pause stretched further, and the arena didn't know how to breathe through it. Screens flickered, then steadied. Commentary tried to anchor the moment, but their tone betrayed them. There was confusion, layered with something close to apprehension. The crowd shifted, some standing without intention, others frozen in their seats. This wasn't the electricity of anticipation. It was the tension of uncertainty, the kind that makes people second-guess their own reactions. When the music finally hit, it wasn't loud enough to overwhelm the silence. It crept in, low and deliberate, forcing the audience to listen rather than react. The entrance didn't explode into light, it emerged. Becky Lynch appeared not as a return, but as a presence that had been waiting. There was no smile, no acknowledgement of nostalgia. Her face carried weight, the kind that comes from decisions that can't be undone. She moved slowly, each step measured, as if the ground itself demanded respect. The crowd didn't cheer immediately. Some didn't cheer at all. The reaction fractured into disbelief, awe, and something darker that sat uncomfortably in the chest. Commentary faltered, words colliding, trying to frame what they were seeing without fully understanding it. Becky didn't look toward the cameras the way she used to. Her eyes stayed forward, fixed on the ring like it was a destination rather than a stage. The energy around her wasn't triumphant. It was heavy, oppressive, almost accusatory. In the ring, Jade Cargill stood in silence, her presence unchanged, dominant, even without movement. She didn't react the way people expected. No shock, no retreat, just stillness. That stillness spoke louder than any gesture could have. The space between them felt charged, not with rivalry, but with consequence. Two forces occupying the same moment, neither willing to soften. The audience began to realize this wasn't a moment designed to make them feel good. It wasn't inviting them to celebrate. It was confronting them. Becky's return didn't ask for acceptance. It demanded acknowledgement. The silence grew again, thicker than before, and in it, people felt something unfamiliar. This wasn't a hero coming home. It was a reckoning, stepping into the light, and nobody in the building seemed prepared for what that meant. The segment ended without release, without the emotional exhale people were conditioned to expect. Backstage, the tension didn't dissipate. It multiplied. Wrestlers avoided eye contact, not out of disrespect, but fear of implication. Questions surfaced quietly, then were swallowed just as fast. What did this mean for the division, for opportunities, for safety? Becky's presence shifted the internal balance, and nobody was sure where they stood anymore. Authority figures moved quickly, meetings forming in corners, voices low, expressions tight. There was pressure to respond, to frame the moment before it framed them. Media requests surged instantly, narratives forming before answers existed. The return was already being debated, dissected, labeled as bold or irresponsible, depending on who was asked. Nobody could agree on what they had witnessed, only that it couldn't be ignored. Jade Cargill felt the weight differently. Even in silence, her name dominated the conversation. The moment had attached itself to her legacy, whether she wanted it or not. Expectations shifted overnight. She wasn't just a presence anymore, she was a measuring stick. Comparisons were inevitable, unfair, and relentless. Every future move would be seen through the lens of that night. For Becky, the cost extended beyond the arena. Family conversations became heavier, filled with unspoken concern. The decision to return this way, to carry this version of herself back into the public eye, wasn't just professional. It rippled outward, affecting the people who shared the burden with her. Support existed, but so did worry. The industry doesn't pause for personal consequences. As days passed, the shock didn't fade. It hardened. Fans argued online, analysts speculated, peers stayed cautious. Return wasn't becoming comfortable, and that discomfort was the point. Becky hadn't come back to reclaim something familiar. She had come back to challenge the idea that familiarity was safe. The company felt it. The locker room felt it. The audience felt it. And beneath all of it was a question nobody wanted to answer out loud. What happens when a return isn't meant to reassure, but to unsettle everything it touches? Weeks later, the aftershocks were still being felt. Matches carried an edge that hadn't existed before. Moes felt guarded, as if everyone was choosing their words with new awareness. Becky's presence lingered even when she wasn't on screen, a reminder that the tone had shifted. There was no reset button, no way to return to before. The company tried to steady itself, but the ground remained uneven. Locker room conversations changed. Younger wrestlers questioned their trajectories, wondering what kind of environment they were stepping into. Veterans reassessed their roles, recognizing that the hierarchy they understood was no longer fixed. Authority figures faced criticism from both sides, accused of either courting chaos or failing to control it. There was no winning position, only management to fallout. Media coverage refused to simplify the story. Every attempt to frame Becky's return as purely strategic or purely emotional fell apart under scrutiny. It was both and neither, and that ambiguity made people uneasy. Fans who once sought escapism now found themselves confronting something heavier, something closer to reality than comfort. Attendance didn't drop, engagement didn't wane, but the tone of engagement shifted, becoming sharper, more divided. Jade continued to carry her silence like armor. Each appearance was dissected for meaning that wasn't offered. Her restraint frustrated some and impressed others. It became clear that whatever was coming next would demand more than spectacle. It would demand resilience. Becky remained measured, unyielding. She didn't soften her edges to ease the reaction. She let the discomfort breathe. In doing so, she forced everyone else to confront their own expectations of what a return should be. This wasn't about reclaiming a spot. It was about redefining the cost of standing there. And as the weeks stretched on, one truth became unavoidable. The industry hadn't been ready for this, not because it was shocking, but because it was honest. Time usually dulls moments like this, smoothing them into digestible memories. This one resisted that process. It stayed sharp, pressing against every storyline that followed. People spoke about it in hushed tones, as if raising their voices might give it more power. Becky Lynch's return became less about the night itself and more about what it exposed. Vulnerabilities, ambitions, fears that had been hidden beneath layers of performance. The company adapted, but adaptation came with scars. Decisions were scrutinized more intensely. Trust was tested. The audience grew more discerning, less willing to accept easy narratives. Jade Cargill's path forward became one of the most watched, not because of conflict, but because of implication. Every step carried the shadow of that silent standoff. For Becky, the weight never lifted. She carried it deliberately, choosing not to deflect or dilute it. The darker edge of her return wasn't a phase. It was a statement. That some things can't be wrapped in nostalgia. That some returns aren't meant to heal. They're meant to reveal. In the end, the night didn't give anyone closure. It gave them responsibility. To decide what kind of stories they were willing to tell, and what kind of truth they were willing to sit with. The arena eventually hosted louder cheers, brighter moments, easier emotions, but beneath all of it lingered the memory of a silence that changed everything. This wasn't just a comeback, it was a fracture line. And as the industry moved forward, the question remained, unresolved and uncomfortable. When someone returns carrying that much weight, are we prepared for what it demands from every